started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for, I'm not sure if I need the microphone, but I'll use it just to sound clear. Thank you for coming on a Saturday morning. There's lots of food, so feel free to grab some. On the table, you'll also find some programs and 2 poems. One is by Du Bois, and the other is a translation of Bidrohi by Nazrul, both of which will be recited today. So to start off the event, I wanted to read our event statement. And then later I will describe briefly the program for today. So today, at our celebration, Pan-Asia, A New Dawn of Peace, we'll examine the rich civilizational traditions that Asia holds and their relevance and importance for humanity today. In the last 20 years, the greater Boston area has experienced a 200% increase in Asians: Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Korean, Filipino, Pakistani. The population in many towns around Boston are 20 to 30% Asian. But even surrounded by so many Asians, young people are taught by Western society that Asians come from cultures full of submissive people and dictators. We are taught that we are lucky to be living in a Western society with freedom and democracy. We look towards the East and see countries scarred from years of colonialism and imperialism. So the Asian immigrant becomes convinced that they should separate themselves from the lands and civilizations that gave birth to them. For what could they possibly hold that is of relevance and importance today? This leads to a stereotype of the Asian immigrant experience that is based in some truth. For some reason, all children of immigrants reach a point in their lives where they'll do anything to shake off their parents and shake off a foreign culture blocking them from whiteness. Following an unspoken but real pressure, young people try to climb up a ladder of success, try to achieve acceptance from white people, seek wealth and fleeting flashy symbols of making it, all while they go farther and farther from their families and all that gave birth to them. And yet, we live in a world today where Western civilization can no longer dominate, and its claims to superiority cannot be accepted seriously, are seen as hypocritical and are without substance. The history of Western civilization is one of the subjugation of other peoples, beginning with the transatlantic slave trade, the enslavement and degradation of Africa, and leading to a modern culture today where we bully other nations to follow our bidding. And this culture affects the values of self-centeredness and disrespect for human beings different from us that our children are raised by. And so the average American is more familiar with the inevitability of war than their country's own historic freedom fighters for peace: Martin Luther King Jr., W.E.B. Du Bois, and Paul Robeson. Violence has become such an essential part of American life that we cannot imagine moving towards a peaceful and just world. Extreme individualism and selfishness have become the norm, so we teach only luxury and self-attainment rather than sacrifice for the betterment of humanity. Alienation, pessimism, and depression have become our default way of being, and we cannot imagine friendship and solidarity between ourselves and nations of the world. And now, of all times, is the time to stand against rather than continue to look up to the West. Western civilization has taught the modern world to be violent, self-centered, individualistic, dominating, but leaders from the East have been speaking explicitly about the significance of our ancient traditions of peace in saving our world from dehumanization. From South Asia, for example, the great Indian poet Tagore said over 100 years ago, quote, "We are asking ourselves everywhere in the East, is this frightfully overgrown Western power really great? It can bruise us from without, but can it add to our wealth of spirit? It can sign peace treaties, but can it give peace?" End quote. And from China, Sun Yat-sen said that all peoples in the 20th century have a choice between the rule of might or the rule of right. That in the face of a rising modern Western way of domination, Asian people must remember their ancient roots of peace and choose to move society with moral rightness. Leaders like Tagore and Sun Yat-sen said that the largest question we face is deciding what moral grounds and in what spirit society should be anchored in and guided by. They spoke towards reviving historic links that were broken by Western domination between Asian peoples and between Asia and Africa. They were part of what Martin Luther King Jr. called a world revolution, which influenced and informed the Black freedom struggle in America. And so we have to make a critical moral choice today, whether to follow the West in its path towards domination or to carve out a new civilization that learns from the past but looks to the future of humanity. Across the world, there are people deciding to live differently, treat people differently than how the West does. And we celebrate Pan-Asia to remember traditions of moral righteousness across Asia. We can awaken and find inspiration in these traditions of humanitarianism to not just ask for a unity of Asia in times of division, but to help all of humanity move forward towards peace. Thank you. And today, for the next 3 hours, we have a wonderful program with speakers and performances. We have poetry recitation by Tagore, Nazrul, Du Bois, and we have cultural performances by Indian and Chinese dancers. And we also have songs, and we will be giving presentations on some of these key leaders from the East who have influenced and inspired the ideas that we'll be talking about today. So thank you for being here, and I'd like to bring up Kridesh Kedia, who will be talking about Tagore for our times.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Today, I want to talk about Tagore, about how he engaged with the world of his time, and what we can learn from him for our time. Rabindranath Tagore was one of the greatest poets of the modern age. It has been said of his poetry, quote, each change of season, each aspect of his country's rich landscape, every undulation of the human heart, in sorrow or in joy, has found its voice in some song of his, end quote. One can hear in Tagore's poetry the voice of the ancient seers of India, of the poets of the Upanishads, of Kabir, and of the Vaishnav hymns. His poetry makes us aware of the moral laws of the universe and of the bonds which unite us all. Tagore achieved world renown with the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913 and traveled and lectured widely in China, Japan, the Soviet Union, Europe, and America. His engagement with the world is important for us to study today, to understand how a man with his depth of spiritual insight saw the West at the time, which, on the one hand, was engaged in the inhuman exploitation of Asia and Africa, and on the other hand, was promoting itself as the apex of human civilization. Shortly after the Nobel Prize in 1916, Tagore traveled to Japan, which was then a rising power, and warned Japan against imitating Western civilization. In his lecture, Nationalism in Japan, he said, quote, "We have seen this great stream of civilization choking itself from debris carried by its innumerable channels. We have seen that with all its vaunted love of humanity, it has proved itself the greatest menace to man. Far worse than the sudden outbursts of nomadic barbarism from which men suffered in the early ages of history. We have seen that in spite of its boasted love of freedom, it has produced worse forms of slavery than ever were current in earlier societies. Slavery whose chains are unbreakable, either because they are unseen or because they assume the names and appearance of freedom," end quote. He went on to say, quote, "Therefore, you cannot with a light heart accept the modern civilization with all its tendencies, methods, and structures and dream that they are inevitable. You must apply your Eastern mind, your spiritual strength, your love of simplicity, your recognition of social obligation, in order to cut out a new path for this great, unwieldy car of progress, shrieking out its loud discords as it runs. End quote. Addressing the people of the West in his lecture, Nationalism in the West, he said, quote, "This bartering of your higher aspirations of life for profit and power has been your own free choice, and I leave you there at the wreckage of your soul, contemplating your protuberant prosperity." End quote. Tagore's view of Western civilization was in sharp contrast to his admiration for the civilization of China. Addressing the people of China in 1924, he said, quote, "Your old civilization has enriched the soil of the heart. Its constant human touch has a vitalizing effect on everything belonging to it." End quote. Yet, Tagore hoped that the soul of the West would redeem itself. In a lecture in Japan titled "The Spirit of Japan," he said of the West, quote, "The divine in her heart is suffering from the injuries inflicted by her hands upon the world, and from this pain of her higher nature flows the secret balm which will bring healing to those injuries." End quote. He hoped that the East and the West would join hands in building up a new civilization and the great culture of the future. And to realize this hope, Tagore had devoted much of his life and all of his Nobel Prize money to establish the Vishwa Bharati University, whose motto means "where the whole world meets in a single nest." Around the same time, in 1920, Gandhi had started the non-cooperation movement in India. Tagore saw the non-cooperation movement as a rejection of the West, going against his hope of a true meeting of the East and the West. He criticized the movement for being based on a negative ideal and wrote to Gandhi, quote, "No, in its passive moral form is asceticism and its active moral form is violence." End quote. Emphasizing the positive ideal of cooperation, he wrote, quote, "Therefore, my one prayer is, let India stand for the cooperation of all peoples of the world. The spirit of rejection finds its support in the consciousness of separateness, the spirit of acceptance in the consciousness of unity." End quote. Gandhi noted that Tagore's concerns had come from an ignorance of the context of the movement. He clarified, quote, "The present struggle is being waged against compulsory cooperation, against one-sided combination, against the armed imposition of modern methods of exploitation masquerading under the name of civilization." End quote. Gandhi further explained, quote, "Our non-cooperation is neither with the English nor with the West. Our non-cooperation is with the system the English have established, with the material civilization and its attendant greed and exploitation of the weak." End quote. Responding to Tagore's criticism of non-cooperation as being based on a negative ideal, Gandhi wrote, quote, "In my humble opinion, rejection is as much an ideal as the acceptance of a thing. It is as necessary to reject untruth as it is to accept truth." End quote. He explained why this rejection was essential at the time and wrote, quote, "We had lost the power of saying no. It had become disloyal, almost sacrilegious to say no to the government." End quote. In fact, Gandhi saw non-cooperation as the only path towards a true realization of Tagore's positive ideal of unity. He emphasized, quote, "Non-cooperation is intended to pave the way to real, honorable and voluntary cooperation based on mutual respect and trust." End quote. Tagore supported Gandhi and the Indian freedom struggle, along with liberation struggles throughout the world, till the end of his life. This exchange between Tagore and Gandhi's response that a rejection of the material civilization of the West was necessary to build towards the positive ideal of unity, is important for us to learn from today. Today, it is still difficult to say no to the individualistic and materialistic values of Western civilization. The loudest voices we hear are those urging us to participate in an individualistic race for success. And it is easy to become trapped by the fear of falling behind in this race. The lack of a visible alternative makes it hard to reject the values of Western civilization. And it is easier to give up and retreat inwards. In this time, we must not be afraid to reject the values of Western civilization and look to the spiritual and moral heritage of the civilizations of Asia and Africa. Nearing the end of his life, at the time of the Second World War, Tagore began to lose faith in the West. In spite of his physical suffering at the time, he wrote in a short article titled Man's Lost Heritage, quote, "The failure of humanity in the West to preserve the worth of their civilization and the dignity of man, which they had taken centuries to build up, weighs like a nightmare on my mind." End quote. In an essay titled Crisis in Civilization, one of his last writings, Tagore wrote, quote, "I had at one time believed that the springs of civilization would issue out of the heart of Europe. But today, when I am about to quit the world, that faith has gone bankrupt altogether." End quote. Of the reasons for the failure of the West, he wrote, quote, "It seems clear to me that this failure is due to man's repudiation of moral values in the guidance of their national affairs and to their belief that everything is determined by a physical chain of events which could be manipulated by man's cunning or might." End quote. In The World in Africa, written shortly after the Second World War, the great intellectual Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois traces the moral collapse of European civilization to the transatlantic slave trade, on the back of which Europe had come to dominate the world and in the process lost her soul. At the end of his life, Tagore saw hope for humanity in the East. In Crisis of Civilization, he wrote, quote, "And yet, I shall not commit the grievous sin of losing faith in man. I would rather look forward to the opening of a new chapter in his history after the cataclysm is over and the atmosphere rendered clean with the spirit of service and sacrifice. Perhaps that dawn will come from this horizon, from the east, where the sun rises." End quote. Today, to move towards peace in a world where war and poverty continue unabated, we must be unafraid to reject the values of Western civilization and take on the responsibility of a new synthesis of values for our times. Thank you.
And now we'll have a poetry recitation by Jeremiah Kim of Poem 61 by Tagore. And then after a few more speeches and presentations and poetry recitations and performances, we'll have time for discussion before an intermission.
Hello. I'm actually going to read two poems by Tagore, the first of which is called A Weary Pilgrim, which he wrote in 1929, I believe, as he was on his way to Japan. A weary pilgrim, I traveled across the haunts of iron-limbed monsters, prolific of progeny, shrieking and stinking, befouling heaven and earth, devouring life to change it into piles of deadly peril. The path is intricate, unfriendly the night. The barred gates guarded by a snarling suspicion that growls at the shadows of strangers seeking home. Send thy welcome signal, O rising sun. Open the golden gate at the ancient shrine of the east, where dwells the spirit of man, great as the grass that blesses the lowly dust, and meek as the mountain under stars. And then this is poem 61. Thou hast given us to live. Let us uphold this honor with all our strength and will, for thy glory rests upon the glory that we are. Therefore, in thy name, we oppose the power that would plant its banner upon our soul. Let us know that thy light grows dim in the heart that bears its insult to bondage, and that life, when it becomes feeble, typically yields thy throne to untruth. For weakness is the traitor who betrays our soul. Let this be our prayer to thee. Give us power to resist pleasure where it enslaves us, to lift our sorrow up to thee as the summer holds its midday sun. Make us strong that our worship may flower in love and bear fruit in work. Make us strong that we may not insult the weak and the fallen, that we may hold our love high where all things around us are wearing the dust. They fight and kill for self-love, giving it thy name. They fight for hunger that thrives on our brother's flesh. They fight against thine anger and die. But let us stand firm and suffer with strength. For the true, for the good, for the immortal and man, for thy kingdom which is in the union of hearts, for the freedom which is of the soul. Thank you.
And now it is my great honor to invite Dr. Winston Langley to come speak. Dr. Winston Langley is Emeritus Professor of Political Science and International Relations and Senior Fellow at the McCormack Graduate School of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where he served as Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs from 2009 to 2017. Dr. Langley is the author of Qazi Nazrul Islam, The Voice of Poetry and the Struggle for Human Wholeness, and is considered the first Western scholar to study Nazrul.
Thank you for allowing me to be among you. I spoke to Emily by telephone and did not have the best sense of that to which I would be facing this morning. I am very pleased to be here. I think all of what I've heard, both in speaking with you and in the presentations thus far, represent very much my own convictions about the world and our individual and collective future. I was invited to say something about Qazi Nazrul Islam and Martin Luther King, both of whom have triggered particular interest in me, because I do not think one can have a sustainable global order that is operating outside of an underlying moral order. That's right. And for Nazrul in particular, I became very interested in his work because he had a different theory of aesthetics, of what constitutes beauty. He was very concerned about the fact that we think of the beautiful and aesthetic theories in terms of that which is affirmative. And he couldn't understand why the poverty and the ugliness of poverty was not part of the negative aesthetics that was brought into our thinking of what constitutes beauty or impair its quality and integrity. And so, I'd like to begin by looking at some themes, as it were. Dividing human beings into certain groupings has been a historical fact. The Hindus divided human beings into 5 social groups, at the top of which was the Brahmin. Within Greek mythology, as expressed through Plato, there are 3 groups, at the top of which was supposed to be the philosopher king. The Marxists allowed for 2 groups, possibly 3, with the industrial proletariat occupying a special place. And toward the end of the 20th century, we had claims about the end of history, with 2 remaining groups, a dying type and an emerging type, the latter emerging from liberal democracy. Then we have bodies of thinkers and race, divided human beings into 3 or 4 groups. One of these groups is said to be inherently superior. Others constituted varying degrees of inferiority. Gender, which has been with us the longest, recognizes in its supposedly 2 groups, sometimes reduced to 1, and religion, each of which recognizes its communicant as having a special place, often has found some not so special place for others. Then we have what is called civilizations. And in the 1990s, we had identified by a professor at this distinguished university 7 such civilizations, possible 8, he said. Civilization would constitute the dominant theme of our collective future, with one occupying the ascendant position, Western civilization. There's an underlying unity to all of the just mentioned supposed divisions among human beings. The unity bears on the view that you and I, human beings in general, are capable of creating some quasi-ideal social order. That while all human beings in varying degrees can contribute to that order, there are certain historical groups that must lead that order. And so you have the idea of the Brahmin and the philosopher king and the industrial proletariat, and you have the racialist who suggests the superior race, and of course you have religion in which each very often would seek, especially in the West, to make its claim to loyalty. There is another division that is often overlooked, and that is something called the nation state. And it claims to be the ideal state, not the empire state that was born in one, not the city state, but the nation state. Nasrul and King, if one were to take nationalism as an example, were inclusionists because they transcended the borders of the areas in which they live and the time within which they live and the identities they espoused. First, they could not accept, as the nationalists have claimed, that the world is naturally divided into nations. the key point here, naturally. Although they accepted and espoused the idea of a people who may have unique experiences, be they suffering or triumphs or other. Secondly, they did not share the view that one's highest loyalty is to the nation state. They think there are values which may be more important. Thirdly, they rejected the view that the differences people had and have had in their historical experience make them fundamentally unlike others. Fundamentally unlike is the key phrase. And they rejected the notion that national unity of one state should be purchased and maintained by the supposed extent to which the nationals of one state are made to feel unlike others. The practice to them seeds distrust and even dislike of what is often called the foreigner. Fourth, they rejected the exclusivist policy and egoism that is traditionally linked to the nation state that we frequently call national interest. All the groups previously mentioned, and in particular the nation states, that claim to be the basic unit of international life, partake in a central feature. It is the feature of exclusion. Exclusion in geographies, in religion, if they happen to be defined by one, in income, in wealth, in preference, in belief, in moral and cultural sentiments. And these exclusions are at least responsible for the economic system that we have faced over hundreds of years, and which in the past 10 to 5 years alone have created ample examples of a world that is little less than what they call a house of mourning, riddled with sorrow and with pain. The Black Lives Matter movement in the US, the cries of the people in South Sudan, the refugee and migrant crisis. Do you know there are 65 million refugees in the world as I speak to you? The ruins of Gaza after the brutal and inclusive war, the ruining of Syria through the vicious civil conflict, aided and abetted by external parties, the rampage of Boko Haram in West Africa, the defiling of trafficking of human beings across borders, the abuse of the Rohingya minority in Myanmar, the killings in Charleston, in Pittsburgh, in Paris, the betrayal of the Greek financial crisis, the destruction of the environment which is supposed to nurture us. The patterns of exclusion are deeply cultural in that we confine our cultural and moral compass to a convenient homeland, and that is in Coldstream, naturally. Whether the markers of the boundaries of race, social origins, language, nationality, religion, and we give primary loyalty to this homeland. Qazi Nasrul Islam and Martin Luther King argued and sought to persuade us that we are unlikely to solve the problems we face are those that are likely to develop in the future unless we rid ourselves of the exclusionist categories that have come to define us. And I purposely begin with the nation state, since it so intimately closes us all, embodying and defining us and what he thinks of our possibilities. They contended Nasser and Martin Luther King, that we have several overlapping identities, which should be allowed full flower and expression, so that we can become more exclusive, given who we are and what we seek to become. For King, we simultaneously belong to the family, the town, the city, the nation, the world, as well as to nature itself. In the case of King, and here I'm going to quote from his 1954 sermon in Detroit and a letter from the Birmingham jail. We are part of a moral universe which has its moral laws not unlike the physical laws which govern us. So, the exclusive borders to which we earlier referred should not exclusively define us. Indeed, the interrelatedness of communities and the state was a consistent feature of his moral and socio-political positions. And in the latter part of his life, using Vietnam as an example, he sought to emulate the Apostle Paul, who he said, or he saw, as having left the small village of Tarsus and carried a gospel practically to every hamlet of the city of the Greco-Roman world. He thought, as individuals, we have a moral responsibility to convey certain messages. In the case of Nazrul, faced with all types of push to identify with communal cleavages, in an address given in Calcutta, December 15, 1929, he described himself as one who could not be a torchbearer for any group or party. Like the birds of heaven, the flowers of the forest, the poets of music, he said he belonged to everybody. And then, to quote him specifically, it is not at all, and I noticed this quote in something you have on this table, it is not at all the fact that because I happen to be born in a particular country, that I belong to that country alone, and to this society in particular. I belong to all lands of the world, to all human beings of the earth. To each of these two thinkers, two activists, two violators of norms, existing norms, and notice, they were both thrown in jail for ostensibly violating existing norms. The seekers of a model for a different political order, belonging to a particular identity or group, exclusively, one that demands our unbending loyalty, invariably means or is associated with the exclusion of others. It has been since the time immemorial the basis for communalism, for religious intolerance, for intergroup violence, for extinctions, genocidal conflicts, and every form of oppression. The loyalties to one which reject immigrants, even though in the US, for example, most of those who live here at the moment are migrants, either from their parents or otherwise. We want to exclude students who may come from Afghanistan, China, or Iran, or Turkey. It is argued that they may be our enemies tomorrow. So why should we teach them? It is part of that which seeks to fuel the idea that we can make profits for shareholders without any regard for the sick person whose payment for the benefits of some hospital care indeed goes to the pocket of those shareholders. For Nashville and King, the multiple identities we mentioned just now are fiercely held and linked to our character-rooted passions. In other words, all people alike have certain common character-rooted passions. These passions, in turn, link to our identities, some which can tell us something about our need for effectiveness. That everybody has a need to have an impact, however small. It doesn't matter the cultural background from where he or she comes. That everybody has a need to have some relationship with other human beings. It doesn't matter his or her religious or other background. That every individual has a need for unity. Everybody has a need for some rootedness, having some sense of the past, as it were. Within all of those channels, they acknowledge that we have a personal identity. Maybe a physical appearance or blood chemistry or fingerprints. That we have a social identity, sometimes many social identities, depending on the groups with which we interact. We have national identities, because the world has been divided up into nation states. Even though we do not know what an American may look like who lives in California, whom we have not met, there's a construction of an image in our heads about what that American may or may not be. But they argue that we have a global and a cosmic identity also. One is linked to nature. We respond to the beckonings of the star, to the smile of the flowers, to the sparkle of dewdrops, to the hush of the quiet wood, to the texture and rhythm of colors, to the play of electrons, to the elegance of calculus, to the sweetness of the fruit. All solicit our senses and intimate that we belong together as one. Every living cell seeks a larger connection. In Nazrul's poetry, despite what may be considered the turbulence of the times, the sea is in love with the moon. He was thinking in terms of the influence of the moon and waters. But he transposed that into what we consider for metaphorical life. He was dealing more with our possibilities, however. What he considered the fathomless and infinite possibility of the self. Not to be confined to what is considered the nation state and what it instructs us. For King, we're all God's children, therefore we are brothers. And this brings us to the idea, is there a reconciliation between the personal identity and our other universal linkages, as it were. Political scientists, have wrestled with this for a long time. There was a time when thinkers did not believe that it was possible to form associations outside of the village or the city. Because we are known to possess a capacity for empathy. But
can the empathy or sympathy go beyond the city or the city-state or the township? Can a Bostonian Christian be passionately engaged on behalf of Muslims in Jakarta, Indonesia? Or a Christian in Cambridge? What King and Nasr wrestled with as the nature of human identity. They argue that the link between the individual American or the individual Christian or the individual Muslim and the greater universe is our human identity. Our human identity. This identity, contrary to what is taught, is at once the most basic and the most intimate. Mothers are anxious about their children, wherever mothers are. Each person has the need to make the then pre-mentioned and all the related necessary touches. But from the day we were born, every effort has been made to tell us and to persuade us that our most important entity is not a human one. It is the entity called Langley, or American, or Muslim, or black, or middle class, or liberal, or rightist, or leftist, or professor, or terrorist, or woman, or peasant, etc., etc. Very rarely is the idea of the human identity mentioned. But we are human before we are Muslims, or Christians, or Americans, or women, or men. And the natural and king, the order of our moral responsibility should reflect the order of our being. Otherwise, according to King, we will live in a Darwinian universe in which the survival of the slickest will emerge to lead us. To ignore, to disdain, to degrade, to humiliate, to torture, to kill those that are said to be different. The pursuit of the interest of people and the groups to which they care, to the disadvantaged, and all who are dependent on us, is something we should reflect on. For King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And Nazrul, in his poem entitled Coolies and Laborers, if one human being is humiliated, let it be considered the humiliation of the whole humanity. If one human being is this is Nazrul, who is not caught up in the preferential relationships of race and nationality, religion and gender, etc. He could not understand why our human identity should be sacrificed because what happens to be, and he wrote poems on all of what I'm going to be mentioning, peasants, prostitute, laborers, beggars, women, coolie, Muslim, Jews, communists, Buddhist, Parsi, Jain, Hindu, Confucian, etc. He wrote on all of this. It cannot be the immoral to kill our neighbor across the street, but moral to kill our neighbor across the ocean. It cannot be moral to possess guns intended to kill and maim those with whom we interact in everyday encounters and while we pray, but moral to build and possess weapons intended to destroy cities, towns, nations. It cannot be moral to poison my milk, but moral to poison the rivers and the lakes and the oceans and the farmlands and other expressions of which the milk may impact. Likewise, it cannot be moral to sell products known to be harmful to consumers in Cambridge, but moral to send them in Sao Paulo, San Juan, Dhaka, or Moscow. This is not a matter of geography. This is a matter of humanity. One. It is instructive, paraphrasing Hannah Arendt, to see that in the recent refugee crisis, many people, stripped of everything except their humanity, are now being rejected by those who appoint themselves as defenders of human rights.
Exactly.
I'm coming to the end of my remark, but allow me to make two other points. That above and beyond pointing out to the worship of the groups to which we may claim to belong, the exclusion of others, etc. National team think we need two very important things, apart from recognizing our human identity and the moral and aesthetic capture of those who present. We need to do according to National and King nothing less than a reconstruction of ourselves. They argue that we have to reconstruct ourselves if we're going to reconstruct the global order. The latter, I cannot go into today as much of the extension of our discussion, but the reconstruction begins by the rejection and the scorn that we should hold for the miserable aims which begin and end with the individual. That somehow nobody else matters. This type of beginning and ending undermines, in the words of King, the soul of a self-sustaining culture. In the case of Najul, we are rendered by experience to understand the pain of the world and discover the joy of sacrifice. Another enabling step, and Najul was writing about this. He's writing in 1929 about issues of race and class. This is before World War II and the genocidal conflict that we find with that. They urge the equivalent of a majestic Article 2, Section 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It recites that every human being is entitled to all the rights and freedoms contained within the Declaration, whether it be food or education or healthcare or speech, thought and religion, life, security of person, from arbitrary arrest and detention, inhuman and degrading treatment, to seek, receive, and impart information across borders. Everyone, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origins, property, birth, or other status. That is the elastic clause. Other status. This type of acceptance for Nazareth and for King is sort of a bare minimum, because he sees us as a sort of universal temple whose possibilities are unlimited. And I'll quote a poem. The heart is Jerusalem, it is Medina, it is Kaaba, it is a mosque, a temple, a church. Here sat Jesus and Moses and joined in the light of truth. In the field of battle, the holder of the eternal fruit sang the Gita. Retiring into the sanctum sanctarium of the heart, Sakyamuni Buddha. The still, sad cry of humanity was heard and relingered. In the cave of the darling Arabia sat in meditation and heard a call and preached the message of equality. I have heard no untruth, brother and sister. There is no temple, no Kaaba greater than the human heart. This symbol of devotion to something afar and at home is a statement to suggest that we have an unfinished temple to which we must attend. In the reconstruction of self, that we must deal with the work of pursuing our own completion. Completion not in the sense of a final perfection, but a more comprehensive condition of being. And I will end with a poem entitled Walls. Without consideration, without pity, without shame. They have built great and high walls around me. And now I sit here in despair to think of nothing else that gnaws my fate in my mind. For I have many things to do outside. And why did I not pay attention when they were building the wall? But I never heard the noise or the sound of the builders. Imperceptibly, they shut me out from the outside world. The walls are gender, class, ethnicity, religion, immigrant status, nationality, disability, property, etc. These are the walls that have kept us apart. I hope as you pursue what you have so commendably done in seeking to link our diverse brothers and sisters throughout the world and to find an alternative for that which we currently face under the claims of civilization, that all the blessings will attend you. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Harsha Sena to recite Vidro Kipa and Nazrul.
Kazi Nazrul Islam is known as Bidrohi Kavi, the rebel poet of Bengal, the national poet of Bangladesh, and more truly, a world poet. Nazrul said, even though I was born in this country, Bengal, in this society, I don't belong to just this society. I belong to the world. He was a freedom fighter during the Indian anti-colonial movement and wrote against oppression and for freedom, justice, and humanity, which led to the British banning his books and imprisoning him. I'm going to recite Bidrohi, my favorite poem by Kazi Nazrul, and I hope you enjoy it. বলো বীর, বলো উন্নত শির, শির নেহারি আমারই নত শির ওই শিখর হিমাদ্রি। বলো বীর, বলো মহাবিশ্বের মহাকাশ খাড়ি, চন্দ্র সূর্য গ্রহ তারা ছাড়ি, ভুলক দুলক গোলক ভেদিয়া, খোদার আসন আড়স ছেদিয়া, উঠিয়াছি চির বিস্ময় আমি বিশ্ববিধাত্রীর। মম ললাটে রুদ্র ভগবান জলে, রাজ রাজ টিকা দীপ্ত জয়শ্রীর। বলো বীর, আমি চির উন্নত শির, আমি চির দুর্দম দুর্বিনীত নৃশংস, মহাপ্রলয়ের আমি নটরাজ, আমি সাইক্লোন, আমি ধ্বংস, আমি মহাভয়, আমি অভিশাপ বৃদ্ধির, আমি দুর্বার, আমি ভেঙে করি সব চুরমার, আমি অনিয়ম উচ্ছৃঙ্খল, আমি দলে যাই যত বন্ধন যত নিয়ম কানুন শৃঙ্খল, আমি মানি না কোনো আইন, আমি ভরাডুবি করি ভরাডুবি, আমি টর্পেডো, আমি ভীম ভাসমান মাইন, আমি ধূর্জটি, আমি এলোকেশে ঝড় অকাল বৈশাখীর, আমি বিদ্রোহী সুত বিশ্ববিধাত্রীর। বলবীর, চিরোন্নত মম শির, আমি ঝঞ্ঝা, আমি ঘূর্ণি, আমি পথ সম্মুখে যাহা পাই যায় চূর্ণি, আমি নৃত্য পাগল ছন্দ, আমি আপনার তালে নেচে যাই, আমি মুক্ত জীবনানন্দ, আমি হাম্বির, আমি ছায়ানট, আমি হিন্দোল, আমি চলচঞ্চলে ঠমকি ছমকি, পথে যেতে যেতে চকিতে চমকি, ফিং দিয়া দি তিনদোল, আমি চপলা চপলে হিন্দোল, আমি তাই করি ভাই যখন চাহে মন যা, করি শত্রুর সাথে গলাগলি, ধরি মৃত্যুর সাথে পাঞ্জা, আমি উন্মাদ, আমি ঝঞ্ঝা, আমি মহামারী, আমি ভীতিয়ে ধরিত্রীর, আমি শাসন ত্রাসন সংহার, আমি উষ্ণ চির অধীর। বলবীর, আমি চির উন্নত শির, আমি চির দুরন্ত দুর্মদ, আমি দুর্দম মম প্রাণের পেয়ালা হরদম হায় হরদম ভরপুর মদ, আমি হোম শিখা, আমি সাগ্নিক যমদগ্নি, আমি যজ্ঞ, আমি পুরোহিত, আমি অগ্নি, আমি সৃষ্টি, আমি ধ্বংস, আমি লোকালয়, আমি শ্মশান, আমি অবসান নিশাবসান, আমি ইন্দ্রাণী সুত হাতে চাঁদ ভালে সূর্য, মম এক হাতে বাঁকা বাঁশের বাঁশরি আর হাতে রণতুর্য, আমি কৃষ্ণ কণ্ঠ মন্থন বিষ পিয়া ব্যথা বাড়ি ধীর, আমি ব্যোমকেশ ধরি বন্ধন হারা ধারা গঙ্গোত্রীর। বলবীর, চিরোন্নত মম শির, আমি যুবরাজ ম্লাজ গ্রৈরিক, আমি যুবরাজ মর্মরাজ ব্লেশমান গৈরিক, আমি বেদুইন, আমি চেঙ্গিস, আমি আপনারে ছাড়া করি না কাহারে কুর্নিশ, আমি বজ্র, আমি ঈশান বিশানে ওঙ্কার, আমি ইসরাফিলের সিংহার মহাহুঙ্কার, আমি বজ্র, আমি ঈশান বিশানে ওঙ্কার, আমি ইসরাফিলের সিংহার মহাহুঙ্কার, আমি পিনাক পানির ডমর ত্রিশূল ধর্মরাজের দণ্ড, আমি চক্র মহাশঙ্খ, আমি প্রণব নাদ প্রচণ্ড, আমি খ্যাপা দুর্বাসা বিশ্বামিত্রের শিষ্য, আমি দাবানল দাহ দাহন করিব বিশ্ব, আমি প্রাণ খোলা হাসি উল্লাস, আমি সৃষ্টি বৈরী মহাত্রাস, আমি ও মহাপ্রলয়ের দ্বাদশ রবির রাহুগ্রাস, আমি কভু প্রশান্ত কভু অশান্ত দারুণ স্বেচ্ছাচারী, আমি অরুণ খুনের তরুণ, আমি বিধির দর্পহারী, আমি বন্ধন হারা কুমারীর বেনু তন্নি নয়নে বহ্নি, আমি ষোড়শীর হৃদি সরসীজ প্রেম উদ্দাম, আমি ধন্যী, আমি উন্মন মন উদাসী, আমি বিধবার বুকে ক্রন্দন শ্বাস হাহুতাস, আমি হুতাশীর, আমি বঞ্চিত ব্যথা পথহাসীর চির গৃহহারা যত পথিকের, আমি অবমানিতের মরণ বেদনা বিষ যারা চির লাঞ্ছিত বুকে গতি ফের, আমি অভিমানী, চির ক্ষুব্ধ হিয়ার কাতরতা ব্যথা শুনি বীর, চিত চুম্বন চরকম্পন থর 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 প্রথম পরশ কুমারীর, আমি গোপন প্রিয়ার চকিত চাহনি ছল করে দেখা অনুক্ষণ, আমি চপল মেয়ের ভালোবাসা তার কাকন চুরির কনকন, আমি চির শিশু চির কিশোর, আমি যৌবন ভীতু পল্লী বালার আচর কাচলি নিচর, আমি উত্তর বায়ু মলয় অনিল উদাস পুরবী হাওয়া, আমি পথিক কবির গভীর রাগিনী বেনুবিনে গান গাওয়া, আমি আকুল নিদাঘ তিয়াসা, আমি রৌদ্র রুদ্র রবি, আমি মরুনির ঝড় ঝড় ঝড়, আমি শ্যামলিমা ছায়া ছবি, আমি তুরিয়ানন্দে ছুটে চলি, কি উন্মাদ, আমি উন্মাদ। আমি চিনেছি আমারই সহসা আমার খুলিয়া গিয়াছে সব বাঁধ। আমি উত্থান, আমি পতন, আমি অচেতন চিতে চেতন, আমি বিশ্ব তরুণে বই জয়ন্তী মানব বিজয় কেতন, ছুটি ঝড়ের মতো করতালি দিয়া সর্বমর্ত করে তালে তাজি বর্রাক, আর উচ্চ শ্রবা বাহন আমার হিম্মত রেশা হেঁকে চলে। আমি বসুদা বক্ষে অগ্নি আদ্রি বারো বহ্নি কালানল, আমি পাতালে মাতাল অগ্নি পাথার কলরল কলকোলাহল, আমি তড়িতে চড়িয়া উড়ে জড়ি চল তুড়ি দিয়া দিয়া লম্ফ, আমি ত্রাস সঞ্চারী ভুবনে সহসা সঞ্চারী ভূমিকম্প। ধরি বাসুকির ফনা ঝাপুটি, ধরি স্বর্গীয় জুট জিব্রাইলের আগুনের পাখা সাপটি। আমি দেব শিশু, আমি চঞ্চল, আমি ধৃষ্ট, আমি দাঁত দিয়া ছিড়ি বিশ্বমায়ের অঞ্চল। আমি অরফিয়াসের বাঁশরি, আমি ঘুম ঘুম মহা উতালা সিন্ধু ঘুম, ঘুম চুমুদিয়া করি নিখিল বিশ্বে নিঝুম। মম বাঁশরির তালে বাঁশরি, আমি শ্যামের হাতের বাঁশরি। আমি রুশে উঠে যাব যবে মহাকাশ ছাপিয়া, ভয় সপ্ত নরক হাবিয়া দুসাক নিভে নিভে যায় কাঁপিয়া। আমি বিদ্রোহ বাহী নিখিল অখিল ব্যাপিয়া, আমি শ্রাবণ প্লাবন বন্যা, আমি শ্রাবণ প্লাবন বন্যা, আমি ধরণীর করি বরণিয়া কবু বিপুল ধ্বংস কন্যা। আমি ছিনিয়া আনিব বিষ্ণু বক্ষ হইতে যুগল কন্যা। আমি অন্যায়, আমি উল্কা, আমি শনি, আমি ধূমকেতু জ্বালা বিষধর কালফনি, আমি ছিন্ন মাস্টার চণ্ডী, আমি রণদা সর্বনাশী, আমি জাহান নামের আগুনে বসিয়া হাসি পুষ্পের হাসি। আমি মৃন্ময়, আমি চিন্ময়, আমি অজর অমর অক্ষয়, আমি অব্যয়, আমি মানব দানব দেবতার ভয়, বিশ্বের আমি চির দুর্জয়। জগদীশ্বর ঈশ্বর আমি পুরুষোত্তম সত্য, আমি তাথিয়া তাথিয়া মথিয়া ফিরি সর্বপাতাল মর্ত। আমি উন্মাদ, আমি উন্মাদ, আমি চিনেছি আমার আজকে আমার খুলিয়া গিয়াছে সব বাঁধ। আমি পরশুরামের কঠোর কুঠার নিক্ষত্রিয় করিব বিশ্ব, আনিব শান্তি শান্ত উদার। আমি হল বলরাম স্কন্ধে, আমি উপাড়ি ফেলিব অধীন বিশ্ব, অবহেলি নব সৃষ্টির মহানন্দে। মহাবিদ্রোহী রণক্লান্ত, আমি সেই দিন হব শান্ত যবে উৎপীড়িতের ক্রন্দন রোল আকাশে বাতাসে ধ্বনিবে না, অত্যাচারীর খর্ব কৃপান ভীম রণভূমি রণিবে না। বিদ্রোহী রণক্লান্ত, আমি সেই দিন হব শান্ত। আমি বিদ্রোহী ভৃগু, ভগবান বুকে এঁকে দিই পদ চিহ্ন। আমি স্রষ্টা সুদান খেয়ালি শোক্তা হানা খেয়ালি বিধির বক্ষ করিব ভিন্ন। আমি চির বিদ্রোহী বীর, বিশ্ব ছাড়াই উঠিয়াছি একা, চির উন্নতশীল।
Thank you, Harsha. Next, we will have a message from E.S. Reddy, and then after we'll have classical Indian dances from Ananga Sundararajan. So about E.S. Reddy. E.S. Reddy is internationally renowned for his role in the movement against apartheid in South Africa. As a student in India, he participated in his native country's independence movement. After arriving in the U.S. in the 1940s, he came under the influence of figures such as W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson. He went on to serve in the UN, where he served the Special Committee Against Apartheid as its director. Since his retirement, he has written and edited many books and articles on the anti-apartheid movement and the thought of Mahatma Gandhi.
I want to congratulate Henry Dong and Hidesh Peria and all their colleagues for preparing an excellent program and an outline of the purpose of this event. I have organized as an official of the United Nations over 50 seminars and conferences on action against the racist regime in South Africa. I believe that it's essential to have a clear purpose for the event. The purpose of this event, Pan-Asia, a dawn of peace, is very timely. This first event is focused on China and India, the two Asian countries with the largest populations, almost half the population in the world. Western governments are trying to build up India as a rival to China and provoke tension and conflict between these two countries with great civilizations. That would satisfy those who have been dreaming of making Asians fight Asians, but not as the Asians, or any people who desire peace. I grew up in India and came to the United States in 1946, before India was independent. I know what colonialism meant in terms of the humiliation of India and how the people suffered. In 1919, a British general ordered firing on a peaceful meeting in Amritsar, in Punjab. The people were protesting the arrest of two popular leaders. The meeting was banned by the British authorities, but those who had the meeting did not know. According to official figures, 379 persons were killed and 1,137 people were injured. But this savagery, with few parallels in history, does not make a footnote in American textbooks of world history. In 1943, more than 3 million people starved to death in Bengal, in the east of India, and the British and Americans could not send any food to the starving people. There were British soldiers in Bengal, as well as thousands of American soldiers sent there to carry supplies to China. They had food, but not a morsel was donated to the people starving to death on the streets of Calcutta. About the same time, Britain was withdrawing from Burma in the face of Japanese aggression. The white soldiers were provided transport and food, but the Indian soldiers got none. They had to walk over in hills on the border of India with no help at all. That was the face of colonialism. In China, millions of people were killed to force China to let British and American merchants sell opium, which was banned by the Chinese emperor. Warships went over the coast, shooting civilians at random. That, I suppose, gets a paragraph in the American textbooks, as American merchants of death were involved and American churches followed. How many more people must die for a prince or two? India became independent in 1947. Since then, life expectancy increased from 30 years to 70. That is universal education. Indians are now heading American corporations, Microsoft and Google and Silicon Valley, MasterCard, Adobe, and PepsiCo. How much higher can you get? The worst thing colonialism did to people was to develop inferiority complex. That is now gone. Some Americans everyone developed inferiority complex with China. Emily and Kridesh have in mind to organize another event to discuss happenings in other Asian countries. In Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, millions of people are killed for demanding freedom. In the little kingdom of Laos, which harmed no one, 1 million people were killed, and they are still clearing mines in their roads and farms. In Indonesia, 2 million people were killed before the Dutch were persuaded to negotiate independence. In all these cases, regrettably, the United States was the colonial powers. Sun Yat-sen in China and Mahatma Gandhi in India were leaders of millions of people in the struggle for freedom. They are both honored in their countries as fathers of the nation. They espoused the 3 principles of people proclaimed by Sun Yat-sen: independence from foreign rule, democracy, and socialism. Madam Sun Yat-sen was an active participant in the struggle in China. She attended the World Congress Against Imperialism in Brussels in 1927. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, leader of the struggle in India, met her there. After the independence of India, he became Prime Minister and invited her to visit India. Incidentally, there is a short clip about this visit on YouTube.com. Sun Yat-sen and Gandhi were not influenced by the demands of the colonial powers to stay away from communism. The main support of colonial liberation at that time. Sun Yat-sen received political support from Lenin and military help from the Soviet Union. They fought not only for their country, but had a vision for the whole world. In India, Gandhi declared that freedom for the country must lead to freedom for other countries, including especially those in Africa. Your program ends with a reference to Dr. W.B. Du Bois, the great African American. I will end up my remarks with what I know about it. I met him many times at the Council on African Affairs in New York and at the United Nations. He had a vision for the world, like Sun Yat-sen and Gandhi. Few people know that he was the chairman of the American Peace Committee, affiliated to the World Peace Council. In his old age, he was sentenced to prison for not registering as a foreign agent. Soon after, in October 1961, at the age of 93, he joined the Communist Party and moved to Ghana. He said he wished to die on African soil. And he was honored by President Kwame Nkrumah. He passed away on August 27, 1963, at the age of 95. The next day, the March on Washington observed a minute of silence in his honor. He was buried next to the president's residence in Accra. After his wife, Shirley Graham Du Bois, passed away in 1977, his body was reinterred at their former home in Accra, which was dedicated as the W.E.B. Du Bois Memorial Center for Pan-African Culture in his memory. If you cannot read his 3 autobiographies and numerous books, I would suggest that you look at the entry about him in Wikipedia. It's quite comprehensive. I wish you a successful event, not only in terms of speeches and discussions, but in promoting a movement to educate Americans about a true Asia, its civilization, culture, and aspirations. Thank you.
And next, before some discussion and intermission, we have a performance by Anaga Sundararajan. She is a lawyer interested in freedom and civil rights and a classical Indian dancer trained in Bharatanatyam and Kathak dance and is currently studying Odissi.
While we're getting set up, I guess I just want to say a couple words. I'm not a scholar, I'm not a poet. When I was invited to do this, I spent 5 minutes wondering why anyone would call me to do anything. What I am is a dancer, and to me, dance is how I understand the world, but also when Emily talked about freedom, to me, dance is when I feel truly free. With your permission, I would like to take you to the Indian independence movement in Tamil Nadu, which is where I grew up, where my family is from, where I spent a part of my childhood. I have chosen 2 songs that are set to compositions of a poet named Subramanian Bharati, who was a contemporary of Rabindranath Tagore, wrote extensively in his short life. He composed thousands of poems and songs. He is credited with being one of the individuals who revived kind of Tamil literature and Tamil blank verse and Tamil free verse. He wrote extensively both on religious subjects and on non-religious subjects. I have chosen 2 poems of his that focus on his vision for India. The first is called Sindhu Nadai Isai. It is a composition of his that talks about the land. And when I say the land, I mean literally the land. He talks about the unity of India through the metaphor of its rivers, about how each river brings with it goods and poetry and language and culture that all come together, and how we as a unified country need to come together to build roads and irrigation canals and lift up the land itself. In keeping with that tradition of unity, I have incorporated in a little interlude in Odissi and then another one at Kathak, just because that is what I do. The second piece is called Vididalai, which literally means freedom. This too is talking about what Bharatiya, as he was known, saw for India once we drove out the British, and we drove out the oppressors, the other, the person keeping us from achieving our full potential. What is most striking to me is he talks about how in his independent India there's no caste, there's no slavery, there's no oppression. People are not cowed. And most striking, I think, is the third verse, which talks about how in his India, women are credited not for these kind of Victorian virtues of purity and motherhood, but for their courage, for their independence, for their wisdom, for their knowledge, for their learning, and how in his independent India, men and women are equal and walk together as equals in the practice of democracy. Wow. So, these are the verses that
தோழிகளோட்டின் ஆட்டியத்தம் கவிதை கொண்டு சேரத்து சந்தங்கள் பரிசளிப்போம் சிங்க மராட்டியத்தம் கவிதை கொண்டு சேரத்து சந்தங்கள் பரிசளிப்போம் சிந்து நதியின் இசை நிலத்திலே சேரணன் நாட்டிடம் பெண்களுடனே சுந்தரத்தில் பாட்டினை கோடிகள் ஓட்டி விளையாடி வரும் வங்கத்தில் ஓடி வரும் நீர் மிகையார் மையத்து நாடுகளில் பயிர் செய்வோம் இன்று நதியின் இசை நிலத்திலே சேரன் நாட்டிடம் பெண்களுடனே சுந்தரத்தின் பாட்டிலை கோடிகள் ஓட்டி விளையாடி வரும்
concludes the first half of our program. We have some time for discussion if you would like to ask any of our speakers, poetry reciters, our dancers, any questions, any remarks, and then we'll go into intermission. Any questions?
Hi, you were the provost of UMass Boston for a very long time. I'm just graduated 3 months ago from UMass Boston, so I really liked what you had to say about people being excluded and everything. What did you teach at UMass Boston? Did you ever teach there?
Yes, international relations.
International relations. And were you in the poli sci department, or was it separate department at the time?
Part of the political science department.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just want to know what do you think about what's currently going on at UMass Boston and like the way the chancellor changed and I think around that time you also left. I just graduated from there 2 months ago and I know there's been a lot of suppression of activism and things like that and activists arrested for no reason. I just want to know what you think about what's going on in the current administration. So feel free to comment.
Well, my view is that the university is not just a building. It evolved from an idea that it's universal. And it is not truly a university if it is not universal. That means its curriculum should reflect that universality, that its students should reflect that universality, that its faculty should reflect that universality, that its research, the idea that we cannot share the discovery that a research university, and that's what defines a research university. It's not just its instruction, but it is supposed to investigate, to bring into being new knowledge that never previously existed. And that is to be universally shared. So the idea that the university should be any less runs contrary to my own commitments and convictions.
Thank you. What's your name?
Winston London.
Langland.
Any other remarks, questions, answers?
I wanted to address this to you, Dr. Langley, because you spoke from both Nazrul and King about not being confined to the nation state or belonging to a global or cosmic order which is above that. And I wonder if you could say more about what decisions in their lives you think reflected, what moral choices that they had to make reflected their belonging to this higher order, and maybe even your personal journey and how you got to study Nazrul, if that is relevant to this.
All right, let me take the latter first. I knew nothing about Nazrul. I taught a number of courses, but always interested in literature and art in general. I taught a course in world order through film and literature. I was invited to an evening's engagement by a Bangladeshi friend, and during the evening he and his wife played quite a bit of music, and there was one composition that attracted my attention, and I asked who composed that music, and they said, refer to Nazrul, and I said, who is this Nazrul? And they gave me a book on him, and I discovered that later I discovered that he must be regarded as the greatest human rights poet of the century. and human rights happens to be part of my interest in international relations. So I continue to study and study and study. I continue to do that. I was just mentioning I was in Dhaka last February doing some interviews for such purposes. Natural, and I've come to King in the same question, in their lives took action to indicate their commitment to the global and the universal. In his Bidrohi, in his poem, part of what he seeks to do there is not only to attack many of the stereotypes you were mentioning about Asians, about their passivity, etc. If you notice, the first person in that poem almost dominates it, as it were. But he and the use of the verbs within it to indicate quite a bit of activity. But you look at some of the heroes to which he referred. He was for the liberation of the Turks, for example, the work of Ataturk. For him was most important. The people in Haiti and their revolution in the early 19th century was part, if you follow the Sun Yat-sen and his work in China, they were all parts and parcel of his interest and focus and support. But it's its conception of poetry. Indeed, in my own work on him, I use the word the office of poetry, in the sense that he gave it a dignity that one had to wrestle with. And for him, the central feature of poetry is that it links what may, to the common eyes, may not appear to be related, but in fact they are. And it is the use of the metaphor in that sense. And you find all of these universal references, etc. King's, for me, had to do with, he grew from the civil rights movement linked principally to African Americans to a human rights movement in which oppression anywhere became part of his focus. And the idea that a physical universe whose laws we observe and observe carefully should be no more important than the moral universe whose laws bid us, from Nazar's sense of what happens in the heart to certain courses of action, as it were. Yes. Does that help a bit?
Yeah.
All right.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to congratulate Hitesh and me, Krishna and others, for really putting together this wonderful program. And it's a lot of food for thought, actually. And I also am very thankful for Dr. Langley for his incredible presentation. And within this, I just want to do some loud thinking. Is civilization a useful construct anymore? Because if I look at quote unquote Indian civilization, the crimes against humanity that Indian civilization has committed from times immemorial, whether you carry, the genocide of women, Buddhists, Dalits, which carries on, and then minorities to this day, genocide of partition, tribal, of course, so this construct of civilization really makes these things very opaque. And I'm really glad you talked about this whole construct of 7 civilizations. So I think, we need to think about these things. Like, I've been teaching a seminar on Dharma, one of the central figures, concepts of Indian philosophy, and we're doing Shanti Parva Mahabharata. And these notions, for example, question arises in almost every seminar, is Indian civilization any different from Brahminism? So these issues become very, very important. And other thing is, like globally, for example, 10, 20 years ago, in the social movements, a couple of slogans emerged. One humanity, one struggle. Another world is possible. They really go beyond this civilizational construct. And now, with the climate thinkers, that the notion of not only centrality of humans, but humans in nature, with rights of nature being actually, for example, in Venezuelan constitution, it actually talks about rights of nature. So we have to build on the shoulders of these giants we talked about, but we have to really think in new ways. So I would like to consider it.
The idea that human beings are divided into civilizations, it's a construction that has behind it many things that have little to do with the world we're trying to build. It is an attempt to suggest that having gone through conflicts of many different forms, based on religion, based on the nation state, etc., there's a final area of conflict with which we must wrestle, namely civilization. If we understand that we belong together as one, then you can seek to build a human civilization in which the current constructs have no place at all, except by way of edifying, helping us to understand how mistaken they are. They are designed for a domination by one civilization, giving what is understood as acknowledgement to others, and to show how, for example, in the book and article to which I refer, the late Professor Huntington, he argued that Asians saw things in their particular, not in their universal meaning. Now that someone in the 21st century should make such a statement and still be revered as a scholar tells you that there's a deeper problem to be faced culturally. So I think we should know these things, but we should not elevate them to the standing that others would like us to accord to them. It's for our own instruction and by way of defeating them. Yes.
So now we're going to have a brief intermission. There's plenty of food left, and then we'll move on to the second half of the program, continuing with a few presentations, poetry, recitation, and finally singing by Meghna Chandra, and then a dance by the American Chinese Art Society dance troupe. So.
So this second part of our event, we'll start with a presentation on Sun Yat-sen by Emily Dong.
Thank you for staying for the second half of our program. I wanted to speak about Sun Yat-sen today, not just because he's revered as the father of modern China, but because his legacy is one of commitment to principles of peace for all people, and this is a commitment we need very much today. Sun Yat-sen shows us that we should look to our own ancient traditions to build a world of peace, that the West is a civilization that has been based in war and subjugation, and so why should we look to them for progress? And as Sun Yat-sen exemplifies lifelong commitment to justice, because to win freedom for self is to continue to win freedom for others. 2 years after Sun Yat-sen's death, his widow Song Xinling gave a speech that pleaded to a divided China to remember Sun's legacy of breaking through millennia of dynasties to build a new united country for the Chinese people. And she began this speech by saying, Sun Yat-sen came from the people. So Sun Yat-sen grew up a peasant in a village in the Guangdong province along the coast of southern China. His father and everyone in his district were farmers. He didn't wear shoes until 15 years old, and he said he ate lots of sweet potatoes because his family couldn't afford rice. He says that it's because he believed all children, especially those from the peasantry, deserve shoes and rice that he devoted his life to building a China that could help build a new world. In his own will, he wrote, "For 40 years I have devoted myself to the cause of the People's Revolution with but one aim in view, the elevation of China to a position of freedom and equality among the nations. My experiences during these 40 years have firmly convinced me that to attain these goals, we must bring about a thorough awakening of our own people and ally ourselves in the common struggle with those peoples of the world who treat us on the basis of equality. The work of the revolution is not yet done." Sun Yat-sen believed China can only be free when there's global peace, and there can only be peace when all people are treated as equals. When countries do not bully others and do not establish unequal treaties to control and dominate others. And during World War I, which Sun Yat-sen called the European War, he talks about how, this is in his 3 principles, he talks about how a British general approached the southern government that he had established in China, and the British wanted Sun Yat-sen and the Kuomintang to help the British in this war, saying that if the Chinese helped the British, they would be able to get Tsingtao, a city, back from Germany. And Sun Yat-sen pointed out that the British had actually colonized Hong Kong, Burma, Nepal, and had eyes on Tibet. So why should China help the British and instead fight the Germans for Tsingtao? This British general got very frustrated, saying that he came to, quote unquote, do business, which I think is a very Western thing to say. So in response, Sun Yat-sen said, quote, "Our civilization is 2,000 years ahead of yours. While we are only too happy to help you to advance yours to our stage, we cannot be pulled backward by you. 2,000 years ago, we abandoned imperialism and militarism. We have been peace lovers ever since. We would, of course, welcome the war if its purpose were peace, justice, and equality, but as a matter of fact, you always prefer war to peace, might to right. We consider the brutalities of your might as nothing short of barbarism. So we shall let you alone until you are tired of war. Perhaps the day of real peace will come, and then you and I will work together for the common good of mankind." End quote. Our countries are not 2,000 years behind the West. Like Sun Yat-sen says, these civilizations have traditions that are morally 2,000 years ahead. History shows us that our modern world is born from the subjugation of Africa, from taking the rich resources of Africa to build Europe and America up, to enslaving African people and establishing an organized business of selling humans across the Atlantic Ocean. This modern world is born from the belief that one people has the right to dominate another for its own gain. And so when we think about the problems of today and the solutions of tomorrow, I believe they are part of a moral question. And look at the US, the wealthiest country on the planet, but cities across this nation are split. Half of the city is glittering in excess decadence, but the other half has conditions not so different from the so-called third world. Let's look at Boston, which is seen as a liberal bastion. It's a city with many elite colleges and universities, many smart people, but the Boston Globe reported in 2017 a huge economic gap between white and black people. Non-immigrant African Americans in the Boston area had a median net worth of $8. That means they owe almost as much as the combined value of what they own, be it a car, a house, or savings. Meanwhile, white households in Boston average a net worth of $247,500, or nearly 31,000 times more than African Americans in Boston. I'm sure some of you know this, but public education is so bad in some parts of Boston that they have to literally bus black kids who live in Boston to 30 minutes outside of Boston, to Lexington, Belmont, wealthy suburbs. And yet we're taught at a young age to look to the West for authority. But even with its science, material advancement, where are the deep morals of humanity guiding society in the West? Is there true progress if there's no moral progress? Our young people who are even given the world and go to elite colleges may end up depressed, anxious, pessimistic, deeply alienated, and unhappy. They question the point of their lives and turn to watching Netflix every night in their bed to escape reality for a little while. Maybe getting a few likes on social media makes them feel a little less alienated for a few seconds. This is a crisis of morals and spirit of a society, and it's a crisis of how people are connected to the world and can live life with meaning. Sun Yat-sen connects the two, that deciding which morals will guide a new society are significant, not just in establishing peace among nations, but to give people a fulfilling sense of responsibility and connect them to a much greater purpose. He says, quote, "Gentlemen, we ought to decide at this hour what is to be the fundamental policy for which the nation is to stand, and where our hope and our greatness lie. When the days of our prosperity come, we must not forget the pain and misery which we are now suffering from the pressure of economic and political forces. When our country becomes powerful, we should assume the responsibility of delivering those nations which suffer in the same ways we do now. This is what the Dashria means by securing world tranquility. We should use our old moral values and our love of peace as the foundation of national reconstruction and look forward to the day when we shall become leaders in world reconstruction upon lines of international justice and goodwill. This is the mission of our 400 million. Gentlemen, each one of you is one of the 400 million, and you personally should assume this responsibility." End quote. Sun Yat-sen spoke clearly that human progress is the advancement of moral righteousness rather than just the advancement of machines and militaries. He spoke clearly about our inescapable responsibility as human beings to apply our best creative capacities to building a world of peace and justice, a higher plane of being that is very much possible for humanity, so we choose it, but has not been shown in the recent past of colonialism, imperialism, and war against the majority of the people of the world. And most significantly, he says that not just the point of life, but joy of life comes from commitment to making a better world so other people and the children of the future do not face the struggles we faced in the past and face today. He says, quote, "When China becomes strong again, it will be our duty to help these colonized and oppressed nations win back their freedom. This is a great responsibility. If we cannot fulfill this great responsibility, what is the use of China being strong and powerful? Again, if China follows at the heels of the imperialistic and militaristic nations, China's ascendancy to power would not only be useless, but harmful to humanity. The only glorious and honorable path for us to pursue is to maintain in full force the old policy of helping the weak and curbing the strong." End quote. Sun Yat-sen's legacy is a vision for a worldwide transformation of moral values, and moving away from the rule of might and instead the creation of a world that chooses peace for all people. Like Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1967, quote, "Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. With this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo and unjust mores and made low, and thereby speed the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world, end quote. Each one of us is one of not just 400 million, but one of almost 8 billion in the world. Together we have this great responsibility to rededicate ourselves to the long and beautiful struggle of winning a world of peace. Thank you. To recite a poem by W.E.B. Du Bois called I Sing to China. And he wrote this poem after he visited Beijing.
Hail, dark brethren of mine. Hail and farewell. I die, as you are born again, bursting, new with life. Kith, you are of mine, and kin. That sun which burned my father's ebony, rolled your limbs in gold, and made us both cousins to the stars. Farewell and hail. Now I turn west, where kindly death opens its arms of endless sleep, crying as I die, be born, new China, celestial kingdom, golden realm. Hail, China! I go, I leave, I hasten home, where Dulay's brink can punish a nigger for greeting a chink. My country 'tis of thee, rich land of slavery, of thee I cannot sing. But I can bring greetings from 680 million souls, marching, pushing, pulling, singing, weeping, crawling to conquer themselves and the world. Bursting pale bonds of poverty, dull ignorance, dread disease, hand held in hand of that strong elder brother, great Soviet Russia, Northern Light, emperor of all snow and ice, who wounded and scarred from fighting half the world, stands today, wise, strong and proud, exulting and exalted. She who once felt pain blasting pain, blood bleeding blood, hope eating up despair, but now sits aloft, unconquered and unconquerable, not perfect, but with her eyes firm fixed on perfection, beckoning all her brethren, south, east, and west, white and black, yellow and brown, all colors, all men, all knowledge, all good, eternal China, live again, unending life of death. Hear not the howling of the hounds of hell, old China, hands who kicked their servants, raped their daughters, and prostituted their wives, sent priests with opium in their right hands, guns in their left, crosses on their foreheads and gin in their flanks, to baptize the heathen. Torment yourselves, O Chinese people. Flagellate your souls, my brothers. Do bitter penance for those awful years and centuries of yielding to self-murder, degradation, and despair, the faithlessness to China and mankind. Cowering as you did before the sons of bitches, bastards of lords and millionaires, beneath the rolling guns of murderers and hiss of whoring serpents and prayers of the sniveling hypocrites. Work now and struggle. Sacrifice with joy in just requital for the cruelty and neglect. You, yourselves, meted out to your brothers, mothers, wives, and children, and yourselves. Count sweat and toil today, hunger and cold, nakedness and suffering, as just pay for centuries of surrender. Be proud that with no whimper, no whisper of complaint, you now transform the lowest to the highest, the poor into the rich, the people into the rulers, tears into smiles and prayers into praise. Forget the little shrimp that stinks and stews on Taiwan. Forget his dogs, Ri and Diem. Remember alone the ravaged people, the helpless pawns of blood-stained paws, of bloody jaws. Be calm. Their end is written in the stars. Even their fellow thieves in America cower in defeat. You have faced the dragon, China, that fearsome beast who ruled the 1,000 years, a writhing coil of sin, a poisoned fang, a slimy horror, who frightened you to submission and bound your feet and bowed your backs. Hearken to the drums, listen to the feet, the march, the long, long march from Ming to Mao, led by the ghost of Sun Yat-sen, with the song of Tu Fu, the memory of Confucius and Tao. Sing, Lu, to the starving. Starve with the song, Chao, and Chu Te. Fight, fight, fight. Through the snows and over the mountains, you carry treasure. You carry gold, but not the gold of banks and warlords, but the fine gold of human hearts, whose price can never fall, which is scarce only as it is not used. Spend your gold, China, scatter it and throw it abroad. Buy all mankind as you have bought me and bound me and made me forever and forever yours. Down then, religion and the church, temple and pagoda, away myth and miracle, creed and dogma, up science, truth, right and reason. Come, little England, dying France, live on your own toil and no longer on the stolen land and labor of slaves. Rejoice, honesty, God lives again, but not your God, Europe and America. No, not that. No Christ to kill, no faith to fan. What China worships is a man, a working man, who earns his food and toils and sweats through day and night, and tills his land with all his might, and owns the harvest that he sows, and whines and pulls, and hauls and lifts, and count his children as his gifts, and thinks and plans, and learns and knows, and plant the trees, and sails the sea, and works for all, and all for me, and they for us, and we for them, who love their fellows more than self, and toil for others, not for pelf, and write, and dream, and dance, and sing, and paint and build, and let the air with music ring. Come to the world, and be as free as men can be, and not let freedom prison me. This is our God. Praise to his name. To him be power, wealth, and fame. No lofty lineage does China rear, no lords to strut, no fools to fear, and all its myriad millions sing, work save the people, God damn the king. Let poet, seer, and thinker rule, raise age to honor, child to school. To school, to school, golden baby, China doll, kowtow, all sons of heaven, to the daughters of destiny, mothers of men, to the women of China, pregnant with the fairest future man ever knew. Reach down, O mighty people, with your clenched left fist, grip the hands of black folk. Hold fast the men from whom this world was born, that great-brained ape who stood erect and talked to his fellows, who planted seed and first boiled iron and civilized a world. Night fell, silent and noisome night, ghost-haunted. Earthquake tore, flood roared, serpent and insect bit, fever raged. Starvation reigned, but Africa lived. Africa lived and grew, fared far and flourished, vitalized mankind. Until the devil rose and ruled in Europe and America, worshiping greed, proclaiming God, enchanting his children, preaching freedom, practicing slavery, and making Africans the niggers of the world. To be mocked and spit upon, to be crucified, dead and buried. But Africa is not dead, she has never died. She never will. She writhes in sleep. This 3rd century of her degradation, she struggles to awake. Help her, China. Help her, dark people who have shared her slavery, who know the depths of her sorrow and humiliation. Help her, not in charity, but in glorious resurrection of the day to be, when the black man lives again and sing the song of the ages. Swing low, sweet chariot, good news, the chariots are coming. Then again, peace. Then again, then forward to the world. Forward, mankind, no more murder. Forget today the past, great China. Forget how many would shriek with joy if dread disaster killed China and her friends, choked Africa again to death while they drank blood with the murderers of Taiwan and Korea. Weep, China, for your eternal dead who died for the unborn. Sing, children of the golden horde. Sing, birds and blooms. Ignore the memory of white men who tossed pence to paupers, yoked children to machines and ate babies in their mills, waxed fat on profits. Remember only the saints of the West, John Brown and Garrison, Lincoln and Douglas. Pray that lost Britain. Live in truth, as once it wanted to live, and bring back the world it murdered. America, stop lying. Stop worshiping liars. Stop. Dare hear the truth, no matter what it costs. Turn back from falsehood and distortion. Face fact and birth and not abortion. Communes with the elect of heaven, with Mother Earth, daughter of sky and sun, born of democracy, fertilized by communism, parents of revolution, makers of the world. Sweet cities of China, with gold coil roofs and curling eaves, and flaming walls and flowering gardens, and laughing children rolling in the sun. Thunder your lightnings from the Great Wall to the Himalayas, where pearls and jewels of Joma Laguna peer down on all the earth. Shout, China! Roar, rock, roll, river! Sing, sun and moon and sea! Move mountain, lake and land! Exalt mankind, inspire! For out of the east again comes salvation, leading all prophets of the dead, Osiris, Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad, interning their ashes, cherishing their good. China, save the world. Arise, China.
Now, our last presentation of the day is by Alice Lee on Sun Chun Lang and King.
Hi everyone. I hope to share kind of what I've learned from Sun Chun in my brief study of her. So Sun Chun, more famously known as Madame Sun Yat-sen and deputy chairman under Mao Zedong, lived through a period of great transformation in Chinese history. After the death of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, she continued to carry on his political will and dedicate her life fighting feudalist and imperialist forces, rebuilding a new China, and forming friendships with revolutionary leaders across the world. To truly understand Sun Chun-Ling's contribution to revolutionary history and the people of today, however, we must talk about the spirit in which she lived her life and her commitment to peace, not just for China, but also the world. In 1863, Martin Luther King Jr. gave a sermon titled A Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. In it, he spoke to the importance of a tough mind, clarity, discernment, and commitment in the midst of uncertainty, falsities, and ignorance. He also spoke to a tender heart, love, friendship, compassion, amongst pervasive detachment, fear, and bitterness. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of these dual qualities, tough-mindedness and tender-heartedness, during a time in which people believed that Black Americans were inferior to white Americans and pursued segregation and committed horrendous acts of racial violence. He He recited from the Bible, "Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves," to the congregation, having been jailed repeatedly for protesting the unjust treatment of blacks in Birmingham, Alabama, and his house bombed by those who carried hatred. Throughout Song Qingling's life, we see the same tough mind and tender heart that MLK speaks of. Through those Sun Yat-sen had helped to reorganize the Kuomintang so that it led a successful revolution of peasants and workers against feudal warlords, Song Qingling later denounced the counter-revolution within the Kuomintang that was led by Chiang Kai-shek. The Kuomintang had strayed from Dr. Sun Yat-sen's revolutionary principles and surrendered to imperialism and feudalism, leading to civil war. During a time in which revolutionary workers and fellow comrades within the Communist Party were killed in prison, along with the threat of Japanese imperialist forces, she organized to free those imprisoned as part of the China League for Civil Rights and spoke against the pursuit of personal gain and power and complacency of the Kuomintang right. Her tough-mindedness was paired with tender-heartedness. Throughout China's civil war, the encroachment of Japan, and the genesis of a new China, she called for the masses to take responsibility in building strength and internal unity and commit to a revolutionary path. She believed in workers and peasants, in women and in youth, to be transformed, to unite, and struggle towards a better world. On workers and peasants, Song Qingling said, "They have learned organization and have had a glimpse of power. Peasants are different. They have learned that by their united efforts, they can prevent the exploitation by landlords and militarists, which leaves them, the producers of food, without sufficient rice to feed their families. They have discovered a new system of village organization, in which they have a voice in the management of their own affairs. The masses of China have learned that misery is not inevitable, that there is another way of life to be won by revolution." On women, the women of Asia have long fought side by side with their men in the armed campaigns for national independence, against colonialism and imperialism, against the feudalism and compradorism of their own people. They have faced gunfire, the tortures of concentration camps, death by every conceivable means. Asia's women have joined and led strikes and demonstrations, have sacrificed their lives in armed revolt through incredible deeds of valor. The list of heroines of China, India, Vietnam, and Korea, Indonesia, and other lands is one of which all womanhood can be proud. And on youth. Youth is the bulwark of the revolution. It forms the guard that stands sentinel and protector over the gains of the revolution, and the force that hastens the course of history in its drive towards a better world. Song Qingling was part of a world revolution that was guided by love for all people, regardless of race, class, or nation. She had seen the Chinese Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution as part of a longer arc of history for a liberation of all mankind. It is for this reason that she consistently spoke of peace and friendship and against violence or war. Song Qingling had visited Russia numerous times to speak and express gratitude for the inspiration and help the Chinese masses had received from the Soviet people. She spoke to the Sino-Soviet friendship that served as a model in which China can interact with other nations, as opposed to the ones presented by the US, Great Britain, or France. Rather than subjugation and exploitation of weaker nations by militarily and economically stronger ones, as was common, the Soviet Union provided unconditional assistance. During anti-Japanese aggression, the Soviet Union sent troops to Manchuria in 1945, when an epidemic ran through parts of northeastern China in the summer of 1949. The Soviet Union sent medical teams of doctors and technicians. It is in this tradition that Song Qingling was elected a member of the World Peace Council and spoke against the wars in Korea and Vietnam in support of the revolutionaries in those countries. Like Chinese and Russian masses had, Iranians and Vietnamese were fighting an ideological revolution against foreign aggression. A section from James Baldwin's White Man's Guild touches upon why the study of history and of Song Qingling is relevant to us today. History, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do. It could scarcely be otherwise, since it is to history that we owe our frames of reference, our identities, and our aspirations. And it is with great pain and terror that one begins to realize this. In great pain and terror, one begins to assess the history which has placed one where one is, and formed one's point of view. In great pain and terror, because thereafter one enters into battle with that historical creation, oneself, and attempts to recreate oneself according to a principle more humane and more liberating. One begins to attempt to achieve a level of personal maturity and freedom, of its tyrannical power, and also changes history. One of the greatest wrongs of American society is that people are devoid of history. Some have robbed of their history, some detach themselves from it, others tell themselves lies. If students do study history, it is seen as something to be read, people, dates, and events to be memorized. However, in this process, we see ourselves as individuals, disconnected from those of the past, isolated in this current moment, and unable to change history. Moreover, we are unable to understand the forces that dictate how we live and relate to one another. We see ourselves as incapable of change. However, it is for this reason that when we do start to study the history of the world, that we start to understand the history that brings us to our present. We face it and we wrestle with it. And more importantly, we see that we have a responsibility in it. And I believe that is when we ask what that responsibility is, what our responsibility is, and where do we find the strength in the face of disillusion and adversity. It is for this reason that I think that Soong-Ching Ling is important to people today. She maintained a tough mind and a tender heart, guided by unwavering belief in world peace.
And now we will have our last two cultural performances of today. First, we will have Meghna Chandra sing Old Man River, and then after, we will have two dances by the ACAS Chinese Dance Group.
So the song I'm going to sing is kind of a synthesis of two songs and two great artists and freedom fighters. The first is Paul Robeson, who I think many of you are familiar with. He was an African-American freedom fighter, a supporter of anti-colonial freedom struggles, and an artist for the people, and an artist as a revolutionary. And he was known all over the world, and was at one time in his life the richest black man in America. And he gave all of it up because he refused to compromise on his convictions, specifically his stance for world peace. So the second person who has written this song is named Bhupen Hazarika, and he was also in the same model of artist as revolutionary, artist as educator of the people, and he is from India, and he traveled to the United States in the 1950s, where he met Paul Robeson and was so inspired by him and the example he set that he wrote this song inspired by Paul Robeson's Old Man River that connects the freedom struggle of people in India against poverty and illiteracy and ignorance, and the freedom struggle of Afro-America. And I'll read the translation of the song, which is in 3 different languages. The first is in English, which is Paul Robeson's section, and the second is in both Hindi and Bengali. And this is the translation of Hindi and Bengali. Even as you stand witness to the erosion of morality and the downfall of humanity, why do you keep flowing on shamelessly and lazily? With the insane rage of 1,000 rains as the mantra, why do you not transform millions of people into strong revolutionaries and leaders? Why do you remain silent in the face of the leaderlessness of 1 million unenlightened, illiterate, and starving civilians? Even as you hear the wretched screams of countless people along your vast sprawling banks, without a word, without a sound, O Ganga, why do you keep flowing out? There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man I don't like to be. What does he care if the world's got problems? What does he care if the land ain't free? Old Man River, the Old Man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant tater, he don't plant cotton, and them that plants 'em is soon forgotten. But Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge and lift that bale. You show a little grit and you land in jail. I keep laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. But Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. Gangavati ho kyun नैतिकतार नष्ट हुए मानवतार कष्ट हुए निलज भाव से बहती हो क्यों इतिहास की पुकार करे हूँ पार ओ गंगा की धार निबल जन को सबल संग्रामी समाग्रगामी बना दे नहीं हो क्यों नैतिकतार सोलो देखियो मानवतार पोतो देखियो निदो जो रोष भावे भोई चोके हो सहस्र भाषा उन्मादनार मंत्रो দিয়ে লক্ষ জনের সংগ্রামী অনাগ্রগামী করে তোরণা কেন অনপরগন অক্ষরহীন অনगिनन पंचविहीन निष्ठाण समाज को तोड़ती न क्यों इतिहास की पुकार करे हूँ पार ओ गंगा की धार निबल जन को सबल संग्रामी समाग्रगामी बनाती नहीं हो क्यों बहनों विहीन निरोको देर भक्तों विहीन नागरिक देर मातृविहीन होते मोनो के हो सहस्र भाषार उन्मादनार मंत्र দিয়ে লক্ষ জনের সবল সংগ্রামী অনাগ্রগামী করে তোরণা কেন বিস্তীর্ণ অসংখ্য মানুষের হাহাকার শুনেও নিঃশব্দে নীরবে ও গঙ্গা তুমি ও গঙ্গা বইছ কেন River
must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. Bisitin do pare o shanko manusher हाहाकार सुन्यो निशब्दे নীরবে ও গঙ্গা তুমি ও গঙ্গা বইছো কেন
The last performance of today, before we end our program, is a performance by the ACAS Chinese Dance Troupe. The American Chinese Art Society, also known as ACAS Traditional Chinese Dance Troupe, is the longest running Chinese dance troupe in New England, having promoted pride and appreciation for Chinese culture through dance for over 30 years. Under the guidance of Executive Director Ms. Jade Lin, the ACAS Dance Troupe has won numerous awards and performed in many cities from Philadelphia to Shenyang in China. And as we get set up, I will also describe a little bit about each dance performance there too, before the dance happens. So the first dance is a trio dance called Little Larks, and the dancers are Claire Lynn, Sarah Wyland, and Katie Lynn. And the Mongolian lark is a loyal friend of Mongolian herders on the grasslands. The nomads, cows, horses, sheep, and larks have lived in harmony on the grasslands for generations. The herders love and protect the larks and do not harm them on their eggs. And here's Little Larks. while spreading its soft moonlight all around. Leaning in close, the moon and flowers reveal their innermost feelings to each other.
Thank you all for coming. To close this event, I just want to say a few words. Let us first thank all the performing artists. And speakers for helping remind us of the rich cultural and spiritual heritage of Asia. To build towards peace today, peace that is not just the absence of war, but the presence of goodwill, brotherhood and justice, we must look to the best of what came before us. We must look to the civilizations of Asia and Africa. We must study the black and anti-colonial freedom movements that they gave birth to and build on their precious legacies. To end, I want to read a few lines from Tagore's lecture to students in China. I quote, "It is cooperation and love, mutual trust and mutual aid which make for strength and real progress in civilization. New spiritual and moral power must continually be developed to enable men to assimilate their scientific gains, to control their new weapons and machines, or these will dominate, enslave, and slay them." End quote. He also quotes from the ancient seers of India. And I want to end with this quote, "With the help of unrighteousness, men do attain what they desire, but they perish at the root." End quote. Thank you all.